But first, let me tell you a story about 5 years ago when I was in seminary and I went on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, to Jerusalem, to Galilee. And as I mentioned briefly in my Good Friday sermon, which feels like a million years ago, it was just last week, I spent some time at that very famous church called the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This is a Byzantine-era church that is supposedly built on hallowed ground in the old city of Jerusalem. For 1,000 years, Christians and more have believed that one portion of the church is built on top of Golgotha, that is, the rock of the skull that was the site of Jesus' crucifixion, that rock that was shaped like a human skull. You couldn't miss it. Nearby in the same church, about 500 feet away, is a massive wooden structure that encloses a tomb. That same tomb would be the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea that would be given over to Jesus. A tomb found empty on the third day by Mary Magdalene, the other Mary, and Salome. But as I described on Good Friday, I had a strange and visceral reaction. It was discomfort. I watched hordes of tourists pile into that church, kneel down under an altar surrounded by crosses and icons and thurifers of incense, each one reaching out to touch some of the exposed rock of Golgotha. They took selfies. They took group photos. It was anything but a holy experience for me. On the other side of the church, lines streamed in circles around the supposed tomb, like crowds waiting for Space Mountain at Disneyland. And once you got in, you had about 10 minutes to crouch down and get into this little room that was adorned with candles and icons and thurifers of incense. And in that 10 seconds, you could snap your selfie at the tomb of Jesus. And then that was it. You spill back out into the streets of the old city where dozens of shopkeepers wait to sell you tchotchkes and t-shirts and bracelets to commemorate the experience. This, my friends, is my experience. Many, countless people have a very holy experience, but not me. I was left angry and confused and somewhat sick to my stomach. Now, some years later, I know what that feeling really was. I had felt it before, I feel it all the time, and we all feel it sometimes. That feeling was doubt. Like I said, I felt it intensely that day in the Church of Holy Sepulchre, and I was consumed with a sense that this was not right. This could not be the place. They had it all wrong. And it is worth noting that I was still fresh off the death of my father a few weeks earlier. He had died suddenly. And I was already in a bad place with God, understandably so. But consumed by doubt, I kept searching. Now let me take a pause and say that today is what is affectionately known as Low Sunday. I think because it means low turnout Sunday. But I will have you know that we had record turnout last night. Of course, it's a record because it's the first time we've done it. But we did have about 16 people last night, so we're doing pretty great. It's called Low Sunday because that's usually when clergy take a vacation. And I am going to forego my vacation because I prefer to be here at Easter. I prefer to be here the second Sunday of Easter, specifically for the readings today. So I don't want to call today Low Sunday. I prefer to call it Doubting Sunday, because that's where we are in the second Sunday of Easter. It's the same in all 3 lectionary years. We always hear this lesson. And it's centered on Thomas expressing his own doubts about the risen Christ. Now, it's such a powerful, indelible story, and it is immortalized in that famous Caravaggio painting, which I passed around. It's a little grisly, I will admit. But in that painting, Jesus leads Thomas's hands to touch the wounds. And as I mentioned in Easter, there is a profound realization that Jesus in his resurrected form is not restored to perfection. He still has the wounds that caused his death. There are holes in his hand. There is the spear mark in his side. There are probably even scars on his head from the crown of thorns. It is a powerful realization that even in resurrection, there are scars from past traumas. And isn't that the case for any of us who have wounds or scars, perhaps from surgeries or whatnot? We continue living, but we carry them as reminders. But none of that erases the fact that Thomas is yet another disciple that reflects something incredibly human that we all can relate to. I hope most of us have trouble relating to Judas. I know some people probably relate to Judas more than they care. But many of us probably relate to Mary Magdalene for her fortitude. Many of us, myself included, relate to Simon Peter whenever we act before we think. Or we take the easy way out, as in when he denied Jesus 3 times. And in defense of Thomas, who will become doubting Thomas, and really quickly the joke goes that Thomas points to Peter and says, nobody calls him denying Peter. But I bet most of us can agree we have a little bit of Thomas in us. In that sense, I want to rescue him from this assumption that what he is doing here is wrong. Consider the fact that 10 of the disciples, plus Mary, plus the other Mary, plus Salome, have all had some kind of experience of the risen Christ. Then consider Thomas. Poor Thomas misses out on 2 occasions. He comes back, he hears the story, and he doesn't say, I don't believe you, but says, essentially, I want to experience it myself. Unless I touch the wounds for myself, I will not believe. Does Jesus punish Thomas? Does God strike him down? Of course not. Jesus, the embodiment of abundant, amazing grace, comes back. Jesus always comes back. And he says instead, peace be with you. He gives Thomas a chance to do what he said he needed to do. But actually, I'm here to report, Caravaggio got it wrong. Thomas never touches Jesus. He never needs to go that far. But simply by Jesus coming back, filling that empty void of doubt in Thomas's heart, he is instead refilled with living hope, overflowing hope. It leads Thomas to profess, my Lord and my God. That is called a doxology, means a prayer of praise. He is filled with belief, and he is stronger in his professing than he was before his doubt. This is a visceral point for us all. Thomas had to delve deep into the doubt, to that empty feeling where he questions God, and he questions the existence of a risen Jesus. And in that dark place, but that necessary place, muscles that tear like in a workout rebuild themselves stronger. Thomas is more able to experience the hope of Jesus risen. He comes out stronger in his faith, and we can hope to do the same when we let ourselves doubt. Back to my pilgrimage in the Holy Land. When I was in that dark place of doubt and frustration, I met a priest who worked at the Anglican school in Jerusalem. He was not a part of our group. His name was Father Lawrence, a nice little Welsh priest. And he was visiting the college where we were staying at, and he joined us for breakfast one morning. And just casually looking around the room and talking to people, something about my demeanor stuck out to him, and he sought me out afterwards. He could sense or see on my face I was going through something, and he might as well have come over to me and said, peace be with you. I told him about the death of my father, and I also found myself explaining to him that I was having some real trouble processing what I had experienced at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. or not experienced, as the case may be. Father Lawrence invited me to get coffee with him the next day. He said, forget about the itinerary you have to do. Just sneak away from the big group, and I'll take you somewhere. He took me the next day, after our coffee, to a newly excavated site that I bet some of you may have heard of. It's just outside the old city of Jerusalem in the more modern areas. The Anglican Church, our mother church, Church of England, had discovered it in the 19th century, and it was still in the process of archaeological efforts. It is called the Garden Tomb. There, clear as day, but empty of tourists, unaware of its existence, those tourists, because it's not in any guidebook, it's not on any courses or walks. There in that garden is a curious small rock cliff that, if you look at it in a certain kind of way, looks unmistakably like a human skull. And just around the corner in that garden, there is a certain tomb, all by itself, the kind of tomb a rich man like Joseph of Arimathea might have purchased for himself, secluded, perfectly hidden, spacious. Inside that quiet garden tomb, Father Lawrence and I sat and we prayed. And I felt at long last a peace about the risen Christ. Now, full disclosure, I'm not sure if the garden tomb is the actual spot where Jesus was laid to rest. But for me, it was what I needed in that moment. In my hopeless despair, in my doubt, I had hollowed out an empty tomb in which Jesus could sneak back in and make me feel stronger in faith. For me, that day I had found him, and I was content. There would be no more doubt, for that day at least, because there will be doubt every day. But I knew now to give thanks for the doubt. Amen.